they received a lot of pressure from activist groups to remove police, and they did. We had 2 gun incidents at Capitol within the first week of school. This year alone, in September. And we still, to this day, have no SROs back. And it is because we have a board that is so set on this narrative, this anti-police narrative.
Thanks so much for meeting with me and being available late at night.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks so much. So if you'll just tell folks who you are and where we are, that'd be awesome.
So my name's Alesha Perkins, and I've known you for a little while, so this is exciting to be able to sit down with you and talk. I am just an Olympia community member, basically, that has gotten involved in a couple issues. Most recently has been with our local school board that, I had some concerns about it. So I just kind of jumped in and did what I could do. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I actually really loved just how involved you are. I describe you as a firecracker anytime I tell anybody about you. I think you're amazing. But I'll kind of let you tell what that story is as we move forward. And so, we met, you saw me on a news show, and then we became social media friends, and I've gotten the opportunity to recognize that you're somewhat of a local celebrity regarding policy around, I view you that way because you've been on some national, some national platforms. Because of the stance that you've been willing to take with the school board. And so a lot of what I talk about, or a lot of the stories that I've been covering, really focus on homelessness and addiction. Not that it's necessarily intentional, because the idea behind this entire docuseries is really the policies in our current society and the people on the other side of those policies. And, and we're telling stories, from a wide demographic of, our community here in the United States. And so I love what you stand for. So yeah, just tell me a little bit about that. So how did you, well, first of all, so you've lived in Olympia for how long?
Well, I've lived here since I was 15. My husband was born and raised here. All 3 of my kids born and raised here. And and we went to Olympia High School. My 3 kids went through the Olympia School District. We were always, the parents volunteering. We spent, the last 20 years literally involved somehow, whether it be coaching on boards, fundraising for the district, all that kind of stuff. So it was something that was just really important to us for a number of years, for 2 decades. And a few years back, my husband was serving on a board, I was serving on a board, and we noticed a shift in the school district. Mm-hmm. And I think that everybody kind of noticed a shift around 2016. We can remember that things got very political.
Yeah, and so what did that shift look like?
Well, the shift looked like it's a change in leadership, for one thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that, we started to see a pendulum swinging. There was a lot of stuff going on. A lot of things became political. Then we moved into COVID and we're dealing with that. That became really politicized. Then we went through the George Floyd situation. That everything seemed like it was at a level 10 for a long time.
And how did this affect the school system specifically? And let me ask you one other question. When it came to your kids being students and the Olympia public school system, and I'm guessing we're talking about the public school system, were you guys involved in understanding and knowing what your kids were being taught on campus? And, were you familiar with their teachers and knowing their classmates and things like that?
Yeah. So we were involved. And what I noticed is that with my older 2, my oldest is 26 and I have a 23 and I have a 19. So what I noticed with my older boys is that we never had a complaint about the school district ever.
And they were academically where they were supposed to be and involved in the school.
Involved, doing well. We never had an issue at all. And then around 2018, we started to notice this shift that I was talking about. And it coincided with a change in leadership.
Okay.
And that change in leadership somewhat parallels with the leadership in Olympia in general, like city council, mayorship, the Olympia School Board. And at the time, it was like, I didn't really put it together with the Olympia School Board because who pays attention to a school board? I guarantee you that very few people even know who's serving on their school board. It's not something you even had to think about before.
Right.
So we went through this. What's going on? Why are things so political? Why is my daughter coming home and talking about so many racial issues? Why is everything so socially activated? Why is everything becoming so political? And so we were going,
and it was becoming political in the classroom too, and that's where your concern was.
That's where my concern was. Is my daughter was coming home saying, I spent the last hour in this class. I didn't learn the subject matter, but what I did hear about was what the teacher felt about, police or COVID or, some other charged political issue. And, but then you have a kid who's like, but Mom, please don't email the teacher,
I feel like our kids, and you and I are obviously the same.
Yes. Like, please, I'm not going to tell you anymore.
My mom's going to take action.
Exactly. So, we went along like this. And to make a very long story short, my daughter ended up doing online by the time she was a junior because we were becoming so unhappy with the actual education. So,
were you addressing your concerns with the school specifically? And what kind of response would you get?
So, I called her counselor, who was wonderful, like the career counselor person that works with them. And he was really wonderful. And I said, look, I don't know what's going on. It's not all the teachers. But if you've got 2 or 3 teachers doing this, I feel like half my daughter's day is about politics or about a social agenda or about other things besides the subject matter, and she's not learning. And, he was really honest and said, look, we've had a shift in the direction. And a lot of staff and administrators and teachers now feel that it's their mandate to do this, that this is now their job, to go beyond regular education. So it's a problem.
Now, and let me interrupt really quick. So now with the involvement that you've had within the school district for the previous 20-something years, how did you feel as a parent to know that they made internal decisions about switching or transitioning direction without consulting parents about that?
Well, it was a process of trying to figure out how this happened. And that's when I get to the board.
Okay.
So that's when I got to, okay, how did this happen? Why are teachers all of a sudden doing this that weren't previously doing this? Where is this, direction coming from? And we have a ton of friends who are educators, and they started telling us, we're having to go through all this training. We're required to do this. There's a whole new system that's being developed. And because we were parents that were so involved, and because my husband was on boards and things like that, we were interacting with a lot of these people, administrators, district leaders, superintendent, things like that. Going to, for example, conferences where the district goals were being set. So we were, uniquely privy to some of the stuff that was going on, whereas a lot of parents weren't.
Yeah,
we're probably
they're probably just clueless.
Just clueless. Whereas we,
or maybe not even asking questions, because I know I grew up. My mom was never really involved with what I did academically, and my kid was also going to school at this time, and I noticed the shift too. But I didn't question it much until the COVID thing happened.
Right. And I think during COVID was the huge shift for parents because your kids were at home. So you were hearing Zooms. You were more involved because you were home. You weren't necessarily working. So COVID shifted everything.
Yeah.
And so by that point, my daughter left, started doing online. Then we put her back for her senior year because she wanted to do volleyball, things like that. But it was a struggle for the last few years of high school, was how are we going to get my daughter through high school where she's actually learning the subject matter? Right. And, then we get to last year, and we had already kind of been on to the board of directors, and we had realized by that point, we have a board of directors that have come in over the last few years that are very political, that have almost infiltrated these positions as really socially agenda driven people.
And are not school board positions supposed to be nonpartisan?
They are, but that has totally shifted.
Yeah.
So,
which I can see because the educators started to become biased in teaching political agendas in social studies and different things like that.
It's completely biased. And you started noticing the local political party on one side, which was the left side, getting really, really involved in school board races. And so last year we had a school board member appointed, and it's a very long story, but it's because somebody had resigned and they were authorized to appoint somebody. These positions are normally elected.
And who can I just, when we say who was authorized to appoint?
The rest of the board.
Oh,
so
okay.
there's a 5-member board. 4 of them were able to put somebody else in a seat that was resigned.
Okay.
And the individual that they put in, it was just baffling because this individual had a really long criminal record, but it wasn't the criminal record that was really bothering people. It was that she was not really reformed. I mean, a lot of this stuff was recent, and a lot of this stuff was her on camera saying things like F the police, tear up the city, because she was a really radical activist. And
so were her criminal charges associated with activism or something else?
Her criminal charges were everything from theft to, embezzlement, domestic violence, check fraud, things like that had spanned a number of years. And having a criminal record does not preclude you from sitting on a school board.
That's nice to know. However,
However, it was all the other stuff.
Yeah.
It was, she had gone to the city, the city manager's home, his private residence, with a mob of people screaming outside of his house. I mean, this was somebody who was a really, really scary person.
Yeah.
And was now sitting on our school board. And so there were a number of people who knew this, who were like, how did this possibly happen? Where are we at here? And I thought, okay, something's finally got to get done. So I went to a school board meeting and spoke and basically listed all this stuff and said, I don't understand how you can justify this appointment.
Yeah.
And that's when everything kind of blew up. So that's when I was asked to, come on the news. And then that's when people were saying to me, well, what's next? What can we do next? And I'm sitting there going, I don't know. They're not listening. They turned around and literally called us racist for bringing up these concerns that were completely legitimate.
Yeah.
And so then we were in this horrible situation where it was now a battle between the school board and many parents, not just parents, but just community members who were now starting to question what's happening, what is going on here. And that's kind of the way it's been for the last year.
So, and let's just talk about what is the role, or what should be the role, of a school board director.
Well, it's to oversee a school district, and it's like boring stuff. It's, running a budget, making sure that curriculum is appropriate and up to date. It's, overseeing buildings. It's coming up with school policy. It's overseeing the superintendent, who's basically like a CEO of a school.
Yeah.
And these used to be pretty innocuous positions. It used to be just a group of people. Sometimes it was a retired person, because you don't make money doing this. It is an elected position. But that just really loved, the school district. They may have been policy wonks or just, former educators, things like that. But what's happened is we have been infiltrated, is the word I've started to use, by people who want to use these positions to push social agendas.
Right. And that is so. And I did a little bit of research on her, and I did see a tremendous amount of what would be considered crimes of dishonesty that were associated with forgery and embezzlement. And I believe there may be some drug possession stuff and other things, quite a wide range, and fairly recent, if I recall, within the last 2 years, I would say, with the convictions. And so I was actually quite surprised, because everything that I've seen has been fairly radical. And again, I would agree with you that school board directors, they just aren't people that are ever in the limelight, or people that you see. And it really has everything to do with the education of our young people and what it takes to make that happen. And so...
And I have to say, it started with her, but it grew into a much bigger thing because what we realized is the remaining four are not that much better.
Yeah.
And are completely driven by a political agenda as well. So a lot of parents started to say, well, at least with her, it's a transparent problem. Whereas with the others, they're the ones who were really pushing a lot of policies and overseeing our budget issue for the last few years. So in some ways, she was a weird blessing in disguise because it pointed
At least
out,
you know what you're getting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it pointed out the much larger issue, which was the totality of our school board.
Yeah. No, it is very concerning, honestly. And I was paying special attention to school board stuff while I voted this year, because those are things that we just tend to overlook.
Yes.
Right. We tend to overlook. And the problem is that we're fostering environments for our young people, and everything trickles down when we talk about our system. And so I'd like to just talk about that a little bit, right? Because you see what's happening in our communities. You see what's happening with our young people. You see the fentanyl deaths. You see the growing problem on the streets. And so, how do you think, rationally, like having our schools change from this top-down perspective, like what kind of outcomes do you project? And normally I don't ask people to project, but what kind of outcomes do you project this kind of stuff having on our young people?
Well, I think that the irony of all this is that they say that their number one priority is equity, which is fine. But the best thing that you can do for children, for students, for equity is to provide them with the best education that you can while you have them. And your job is not to make little activists. Your job is to educate these kids so that when they graduate from high school, they can be productive citizens that can get jobs, that they're successful, that they have the confidence, that they know what they're doing, that they have basic skills in reading, math, and science and things like that. And when you take the focus away from those things, you're actually hurting their ability later in life because you're stunting them in their educational growth. And I think that a lot of their intentions are good, but they don't realize that they're actually hurting the equity issue by what they're doing. And so another thing that I've noticed is removing a lot of discipline. Mm-hmm. So in order to make things equitable, because everything has become racial and equity oriented, I've noticed, and once again, these were probably done with good intentions, but to make things equitable discipline-wise, basically what's happened is a lot of discipline has just been removed. That's also going to hurt the kids. You're not helping a kid who has discipline issues to just stop disciplining them. And so what you see is a lot of parents going like, I don't feel safe sending my kid to the school because there's a lot of issues with even really young children now assaulting. They'll call, I have friends who are teachers and they'll say, we had a clear the room situation. And I'm like, what is a clear the room situation? Well, it's when a child loses it, basically. And what they do is they clear everybody else out of the room and let the child do what they're going to do. And that is, in my opinion, the opposite way of how to deal with the situation. And our district is the only district that removed SROs, which is school resource officers, because once again, they had this ideological bias against police officers. And so in 2020, they received a lot of pressure from activist groups to remove police, and they did. And that has not been a good thing either. So, we have a lot of people who are like, we had 2 gun incidents at Capitol within the first week of school. This year alone in September. And we still to this day have no SROs back. And it is because we have a board that is so set on this narrative, this anti-police narrative, and that they're, traumatizing for students and other individuals.
By chance, and I don't know if but over the last 3 to 5 years, well, and I know a couple of those years were COVID, so probably let's say 5 years. Are you familiar at all with any kind of police involvement on the campuses prior to this year, really? Do you know if there were specific incidences or the number of specific incidences that may have been responded to by police that were beneficial to the population?
Yeah, I mean, the police are responding. There's been a lot of incidents at the schools. The problem is because there's what it is an actual lack of cooperation with our district.
So are the school administrators not cooperating with police when
Some do, but it's up to that particular school. So
Okay.
what I have people reach out to me all the time. So I have staff and even administrators that will reach out to me and say, I do not feel like I can call law enforcement. There are particular schools who I know are not involving law enforcement because I have friends in law enforcement who are saying, we know this happened and we know we're not being called and it's intentional. So we have serious issues around the law enforcement issue.
And so during this year, besides the 2 gun incidences, do you know if there has been increased drug use, any kind of fentanyl overdoses, anything else on the school campuses?
I do believe that there's increased drug use. I know that they have had, for example, at one of our high schools, they had to shut the bathrooms because of things going on in the bathrooms with drug use and other, activity like that. So, it's gotten to be a problem.
I would imagine that there are probably a lot of kids that don't necessarily feel safe going to school.
Right. And so you have people literally taking their kids out of school. I don't know how many removed their kids in September, but I know of at least 3 within that first week that said, we're out of here. We're going to go either to Tumwater, we're going to go into private school, we're going to go somewhere that takes safety seriously.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's just wild to me. I will be speaking actually in Black Hills High School to the freshman group because there's been an increased, I believe, some fentanyl use and things like that. Mm-hmm. And so it's really terrifying for me because it feels like those kind of things are being normalized, the assaults and the increased crime and drug use on campuses and the accommodating students and what it is that they want. I know with my own high school child, so she was in school last year and some of the teachers reached out to me and she wasn't showing up for class. So of course I'm like, well, administer a consequence, incentivize her. Do you have detention? Put her in detention. And they didn't want to upset her. What they wanted was to discuss what kind of options would be more beneficial for her. And I find it to be really problematic because it's telling kids that it doesn't matter what you do. We're going to try to make you comfortable no matter what.
Right. And that's kind of what this whole shift and this pendulum going over has also done, and we see that as a parallel with the city and, the cooperation with law enforcement and what law enforcement can do. It's very paralleled with what's going on in school.
So in regards to your youngest, did you guys help her get to where she needed to be academically before graduation?
Yes, but I still feel that she did not get the same kind of education that I feel I got in public school.
Yeah.
And that's sad to me.
Yeah.
And it was not that we couldn't. We had the means to do tutoring and other things like that to help all 3 of my kids when they were struggling in something. But it's still lacking. I can tell there's still lacking some just basic skills that I feel like I graduated with when I went to a school that was more focused just on education.
Yeah.
And so that is really sad to me.
Have you noticed, and have you paid attention to any other areas in Washington State or across the nation where you see school boards kind of crumbling in the same way?
I know that Seattle, so I always think of us as like a little Seattle. And I think that the city of Olympia tries to model after Seattle a lot, which is not always a good thing. But I know that a lot of the things that we implemented came from Seattle first.
Yeah. That's where my daughter went to school.
Yes. Yeah. Came from Seattle first. And then we model after that, which, like I said, is not a good thing. I think that depending on the region that you're in, your school board does have local control there. So they can kind of determine how far they're going to go with certain things. Some things are coming down from OSPI at the state level. And the state level, I always say, has been captured as well. by a lot of these ideologies and viewpoints that they're then pushing down as much as they can. But Olympia School District in particular has just really kind of led the pack in a lot of really socially radical viewpoints and ideologies that they've pushed.
So I'm just wondering, have you paid attention to any of the other school systems? For example, charter schools or any of the private schools? Are they following in the same?
They don't appear to
vein?
be. They don't appear to be at all. And I have some contacts that are running private schools, and they're like, we don't know what's going on with the public schools. Like, we're not going down that road, and the enrollment in private is going way up. Charter schools would be great, but that's not really something that is, I don't know, encouraged, I guess, in this area. Kind of, which I think charter schools would be great, because at this point, I really feel like the more choice we have, the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Instead of just continuing to push that we need to make this better, if it's not working for you, what I'm starting to tell people is just move your kids out then. I mean, we can't, they've only got, a certain amount of time here. If it's not working and you can move them out. The once again, with the equity issue with that is usually parents who can afford to move their kids out either to private or homeschool, and that they have the means.
Right.
So what you're going to end up with again is a subset of kids that are going to be stuck in a system that is not working for a lot of kids.
Yeah. They'll make up the next portion of our population that is stuck in poverty and everything else, because they're not going to be prepared.
Yeah.
What can we do? What needs to change first?
I mean, my big push over the last year was the election. We had 3 seats up, and basically the same thing was voted in. So it was disappointing, and, it feels like a bit of a failure because there were a lot of people that tried really hard to make some changes. But also, like Seattle, I think we have to go through this period of time where I think that things are just going to get a little bit worse before more people wake up. So I think it's a few things. I think that people, there's a large number of people that are just apathetic. There's a large number of people that simply don't know what's going on. And I understand that, because who's paying attention to a school board once again? And then there's a large number of people that actually are voting for this stuff, and so I'm hoping that over the next couple of years, with increased awareness still, because that's my whole thing, is putting out information. Like, did you know this? These are the facts. This is what's actually going on. It's not political. It's not, I'm not against public education. I'm not against teachers. This is just about how do we make this better, and showing people what the problems are. I mean, we're facing closing schools.
Yeah.
That's how
I feel like I've read that somewhere recently.
No, we are absolutely facing
that some of the schools are on the chopping block here.
Yes.
So is that predominantly because of what's happening with the board?
It's because of enrollment.
Okay.
So the enrollment is where
down.
funding is, and the enrollment is really down. Now, what the school board has done is they've gone through a whole iteration of reasons why. So, we started with legislative decisions like the McCleary decision. And then, when that was proven to not be the issue now, then they moved on to it's the price of housing. And, that is also not the issue. You can show by the data that, Thurston County is actually expanding. And
well, and McKinney-Vento is a process that people that aren't housed or that are in shelter systems or anything like that actually does serve the population of kids all throughout our schools. So
Right. And then it went to, the legislation isn't funding properly. And now we're at low birth rates. So what they've done now, and this is true, that birth rates are down, but they have been since the late 1960s. This is not a new thing in 2020.
Right.
And so long term, yes, birth rates are down. But what they refuse to acknowledge is the large number of people leaving because of them.
Yeah.
That are saying, I left because of you, because I'm dissatisfied with this school district. And it's hundreds of children that are doing that. And they're going to private, they're going to Tumwater, they're going to North Thurston, they're homeschooling, or they're doing online.
Yeah.
And they're telling the district this, but they just don't seem to want to hear it.
How much of a percentage? Because I know my daughter went to online after COVID. She experienced a tremendous amount of social anxiety, worse than before. And she was online for quite a while. I honestly think she did better. She doesn't think so, but and maybe maybe you have an idea, but I wonder how many, what the percentage is of kids who have just transitioned to online school.
Online specifically, I don't know. I know private, for example, St. Mike's has doubled or tripled.
Oh, interesting.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Evergreen has a waiting list. They're all, to my knowledge, there's 15 in Thurston County, and I've looked at all of them, and they are all on the increase. The only one that was not isn't because they had a construction issue and they had to close some of their portables. And then online, I know, has gone up, and homeschooling has gone up something like 25%.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
And that's a pretty serious increase, really.
It's significant.
Yeah.
So as long as this continues to happen, the public schools, but especially public schools like ours, where they have these added issues, are going to continue to lose kids.
Yeah. I don't think that these issues belong on a school campus.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, I've always got to bring the fentanyl topic into the situation. And I don't know if you're aware. I mean, a lot of young people are dying of overdoses. We have more kids on school campuses. I mean, they're making Narcan and things like that available in vending machines on school campuses right here in Thurston County. I know that. And have you heard about any increases in, that? Well, and I know you said something about the drug stuff, but I mean, what's the status of young people that are ending up strung out on these terrible drugs?
Well, I think that they're, the friends that I have that do have children that struggle with drug use, and some of them are on fentanyl. I have another friend whose daughter died 2 years ago from an accidental. She was doing another drug, and fentanyl was in it, and she died, and she was 17. It's a huge issue. And I don't know, like, you are much more of an expert as far as what the solution is for that. But I always go back to, I really firmly believe that when we had SROs on campuses, it helped. Because I think that these officers actually helped kids who were at risk the most. Because they're there, they are a human that they see every day. They're watching, they're making sure that, they are knowing what's going on. They can maybe prevent things before it happens. They can kind of take these kids under their wings. So I think a huge mistake that we made was removing that law enforcement element. And I think that that's going to increase the problem with things like drugs on campus.
I think so too. I mean, and obviously with the guns and things like that, because if there's cop presence there, there's a higher likelihood of feeling like you're going to get caught. So that would probably reduce the likelihood that you're going to have that kind of activity on campus. And so, I think that there are a lot of disservices happening right here in the United States. We're just not paying attention, and we're talking about our young people. This is the next generation of our decision makers.
Right. And you can see, what has happened in Olympia. I know I've been watching it for the last several years, and how it's gotten exponentially worse with our amount of homeless and drug addicted and mentally ill on the streets. And
have you seen a pretty significant increase being from here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was a long period of time where you never saw anyone on the streets that was homeless or clearly, on drugs or anything like that, up until about the last 10 years. And I would say the last 5 has gotten to the point where I know I personally am avoiding going certain places. There are places where I don't shop anymore. There are places downtown I don't want to park my car. I had an incident where someone walked out in front of my car that was mentally ill and inebriated. And it took me about a month before I could get in a car again, because it was such an awful experience and I felt so horrible. But looking back, I think that the individual did it on purpose. And then when I offered him help, and we were next to a store and I was going to get him water because he wasn't injured. I didn't hit him, but he pushed an item out in front of my car. And I said, do you need anything? It was hot. It was summer. And that was just my instinct. It's like, are you okay? Do you need anything? And I said, can I get you some water? And he wanted alcohol.
Yeah.
And it was just like, gosh, and one of the first responders that came he said, this is going to keep happening because the city of Olympia is allowing this.
Yeah.
People just walking right out in the streets and getting hit by cars. So
I feel like we're developing the next generation of people in that position in what we're doing in our school districts, in our schools specifically, it really in all of our institutions here in the United States.
And it's coming under the guise of compassion.
Right.
So that's the problem, is a lot of these policies and things that are happening are coming under the guise of because we're compassionate. And it's actually having the opposite effect.
Absolutely. Yeah. We're supporting the destruction of human life.
Yes.
We really are. Yeah. We're distracting from the things that are necessary. And this is what I heard you talking about. There's a massive distraction from job roles, from being able to guide an institution, our educational institution, to help young people develop the skills necessary to care for themselves once they leave the home. A school is such a huge part of that. And we as adults and parents have trusted this system for a number of years. And now we are forced to feel uncomfortable and not even know how to address the system within the school district itself to help our kids actually get what they need. And so the added pressure and stress, especially on families that can't afford it, but knowing that their kids aren't being served in an effective way, it's just piling on top of all of the other problems that we're seeing happen right in front of our face here in the nation.
And the division, the unnecessary division that's going on with all of this stuff is just, I think it's just having a huge damaging effect on the kids. On the kids who should be able to go to school and be kids.
Yeah, and not have to adopt on the perspectives of adults.
Exactly.
That really aren't theirs.
Exactly.
I watched that happen with my own kids.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Thanks so much, Alesha, for talking to me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That's great.
It was wonderful.
I had not planned on speaking tonight, but changed my mind after getting several phone calls from good and decent people in this community afraid to. They fear the real harassment, intimidation, and unfounded character assassinations that not only Ms. Reed, but her supporters are known for. These are families of law enforcement, district employees, business owners, doctors, nurses, first responders, and just regular community members that deserve to be heard. I am talking about the relentless and diabolical attempts to assassinate anyone's character that dares question this appointment based on facts, evidence, public videos, public disclosures, public records, and public interviews. Ms. Reed has a long documented history of harassment, including violation of legal protection orders. This is a pattern. In an interview Ms. Reed gave to Poor News Network in 2021, she stood in front of the Olympia City Hall and said, and I quote, "They've deemed me a threat to security, and they should." I take Ms. Reed at her word. Not only has she instructed her followers to, quote, "tear everything up in the city," but she has led them on video to private neighborhoods yelling and screaming obscenities at people in their homes.
You goddamn right.
I've personally received a message from Ms. Reed's campaign manager letting me know he has spies on my Facebook page reporting back to him. Many people have received threats and intimidating messages from an individual who appears to be quite close to Ms. Reed. I cannot even repeat some of those messages due to language and content. Friends of Ms. Reed's that continually speak on her behalf, including at these public settings, are relentlessly online accusing anyone questioning this appointment as white supremacy.
Because it is.
Other members of this board.
Okay, Alesha, please stop for a sec. So the reminder again for everyone, and this is your second reminder, is that you're going to let everyone speak.
Other members of this board have made the same accusations. against good and decent parents, grandparents, students, and anyone else that has reasonable questions. Race has not once been mentioned as a reason for the disapproval of Ms. Reed's appointment. Ironically, the only people mentioning race are her supporters, including this board. That begs the question, to whom is Ms. Reed's race really most relevant to? It appears to be you, not us. This is a transparent and obvious attempt to deflect from the real issue here. I will repeat to make clear, the issue remains and has always been Ms. Reed's fitness to serve in a position overseeing childhood education, period. Thank you.